Oh, I might not be able to record. Oh, here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Quality in Action webinar. My name is April Reardon. You'll see a photo of me in a moment, but we're excited to have you here to hear about Sparks and how we can use this concept to help build those deep and sustained relationships with young people in mentoring relationships. So there I am, April Reardon, the Director of Training and Community Partnerships with the Mentoring Partnership of Minnesota. This is part of a monthly webinar series that we are happy to be able to offer to all of our programs here in Minnesota and beyond. Just some logistics here. One thing I heard in a webinar recently, which I think is a great idea, it serves two functions. We can see if you know how to raise your hand during the webinar, but I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and it just means you click on the little hand in your control panel to let us know that you can hear me. Let's just make sure the audio is okay. And it sounds like one person is kind of losing my audio a little. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Looks like most of you can see that. Courtney, do you you can kind of help out those who maybe don't have a hand raised? They might be just listening on the phone though too. Let us know if that's the case. Anyway, it looks like most people are able to hear me right now.
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay, great. So asking questions and sharing comments during the webinar, what we do like is to have these be interactive and to hear from folks who are tuned in. So one way to do that is to raise your hand, and one of the MPM organizers, myself or probably Courtney, will unmute you. So that just means they click on that and then you're able to talk to us. So if you have a microphone or if you're on the phone and are able to talk with us, that would be great. Oftentimes people choose to just listen to the webinar, and the other alternative then is you can go to the questions section of the control panel and type questions and comments into that section, and like it says there, if it's something that is a specific question, we'll just respond directly to you, or if it's a question that really should be shared with everyone, then we'll do that as well. If you do raise your hand and are unmuted, just be aware of your background noise, because we'll all get to hear it if the baby cries or toilet flushes or different things like that. I've experienced all of that on webinars at different times. Another piece of webinar logistics, just to note, the slides that you see, these presentations are available at slideshare.net/training institute. Don't worry about jotting that down. It is in your resources, and you'll also get a follow-up email that will give you a direct link to that website where you can view and download the presentation slides. Also, any resources or other links or information that comes up during the webinar, we're taking notes of that, and we'll also send you links to those things and that information in that follow-up email. And we do have a panelist with us today, Nancy Tellett-Royce, as a senior consultant with the Search Institute. Nancy consults with communities and organizations incorporating asset building, which if you don't know what that is, we'll review that a little bit, asset building into their work. Nancy has authored Speaking of Parenting, Introducing Developmental Assets to People Raising Kids. She's also authored Supporting Youth, How to Care, Communicate, and Connect in Meaningful Ways, and also Engage Every Parent, Encouraging Families to Sign On, Show Up, and Make a Difference. And I know that Nancy's had a little bit of trouble with her audio, but hopefully, Nancy, are you here? Can you hear us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Great. Welcome, Nancy. Thank you so much for being here. Some of the background here, or maybe if you want to share some background of the Sparks, and what's great is that it was originally for parents.
We've been doing research on a concept that we call hiving for a number of years, and out of that work has come some exciting new work around Sparks, and we have partnered with the Mentoring Partnership of Minnesota to bring this information to mentors across the state and elsewhere.
Great. I did want to point out, so in case people are new to the Search Institute or to the kind of asset building framework, that the Search Institute has been doing research on these elements for healthy youth development for decades. And so, like we said, some of you may have heard of the 40 developmental assets. Sometimes I mistakenly assume that everyone has heard of the 40 developmental assets, and I've made that mistake before in trainings. But they've been used in communities and by mentors, parents, programs to pay attention to what kids need to grow up healthy. These are, protective factors, or the good stuff in kids' life that helps them, better handle any challenges or risks that come their way, really tied in with resilience and positive youth development. But the 40 developmental assets are broken into these two categories. So 20, half of them can be, are these external assets that can be wrapped around young people from the outside, and they fall into these four categories, many of which can really be directly impacted by mentoring. Within support, one of the assets that's identified is that that kids have a non-parental caring adults in their lives. Within the external assets, we also see, the sense that adults in my community care about me. Mentors can definitely have an impact on that constructive use of time, with modeling boundaries and setting expectations for young people, but so that, the assets are really translate well into the work of mentoring. So the other half of those assets, the other 20 developmental assets, are these skills, values, and beliefs that young people also need to fully engage with and function in the world around them. So young people can acquire these internal assets. So if you think about mentoring, through observing others, learning the skills and having opportunities to practice these assets, to reflect on them with adults and peers, commitment to learning, with academic achievement being such a hot item. We know sometimes it's hard to make the case that mentoring has an impact on grades, but when we know all the good stuff that comes from internal assets, we also know that mentors can have that impact on helping young people's, improving young people's attitudes towards school, their engagement with school. Also tied in with these internal assets are just a lot of the qualities and characteristics and skills that we want young people to have. Also the sense that having a positive view and outlook for their future. All of these things that, again, really translate nicely into the work we do as mentors. So building upon that, this other piece that, because of, through this partnership and when we first learned about it, really thinking the Sparks concept is really accessible for mentors as well and can really help mentors do their work better. So what is a Spark? I'm just going to pop up some of the descriptions that I have heard and that are provided by Search. So if you're able to see this, just in case somebody happens to be on the phone, we'll just summarize. But, what is a spark? They're these qualities, skills, or interests, something that lights us up, things that we're passionate about, something that gives us joy, descriptions like our very essence. And there's a great video on the website that I was showing a little bit earlier if you were waiting to join the webinar, but it's at ignitesparks.com, and having kids talk about what their sparks are, but one young gentleman says it's kind of what gets him up in the morning or gets him out of bed in the morning, the things that you really care about. So just to get a gauge on where we're at with that, I am going to launch a poll. About, do you know what your own sparks are? I'll give it a few more seconds here. We've almost got everybody voting. All right, do you know what your sparks are? Be sure to vote in the poll. I'm going to close it pretty soon. All right, got a couple more. All right. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share with you. So 80% of you, that's great, do know what your sparks are. 20% not sure. That's kind of where I was when I first heard about sparks. I think I knew what my sparks had been when I was a young person, but I wasn't sure what they were now as an adult. But what's also nice to see here is that maybe we don't have to spend too much more time defining what sparks are, because it seems like people have a good sense of the concept of sparks, which is, you know, kind of like the developmental assets. I remember one of the first times I heard about those, it seemed like such common sense, or, you know, kind of something that was really accessible, which is also nice for sharing these concepts with mentors. But a spark, we all kind of get it, and we sort of know what that feels like. And it's something that we can pursue together with our mentees. So here's some other examples of what some of those sparks might be. It really runs the gamut, and I think it's sometimes in talking about them, I run into really thinking about it as a skill or a talent, instead of, you know, being more expansive and thinking about things like helping, serving, or volunteering, or this one in red about committing to living in a specific way, that could be your spark as well. It could be something, you know, some of the things we think of as hobbies, about reading, like those are the things that get us really excited. Nancy, I'm going to switch over to Nancy just now that we have an understanding of what the sparks are, for Nancy to share a little bit of the research that Search has done, because it's kind of great. So we know what sparks are, and it's nice to know them, and it's a nice idea, but so what? You know, and what Nancy can share is that Search Institute's research is showing us that knowing where those sparks are is really important to the well-being of young people.
Thanks, April. And I think from the poll that we just took, you can see that everybody quickly grasps the idea of what sparks are. But at Search Institute, we always want to take a simple question, like what does it take to help a young person thrive, and then put some pretty reliable research behind it so that we really know that what some of the things are that we come to intuitively are backed up by real research. So to look at this question of sparks, we did 3 kinds of data gathering. We did a Gallup poll of 2,000 12 to 17-year-olds and 2,000 of their parents, so a matched set of a parent and a teen. And we also did an online poll with the Lou Harris polling firm with about 1,000 11 to 17-year-olds to get more details about what they thought about their sparks. Parenthetically, we thought that one would be the easy one and that teens would give us 1- or 2-word answers. Instead, they gave us reams and reams of information, and one of the first things they often said was, "Thank you so much for asking. Nobody's ever asked me about my spark before." And then finally, to make sure that we were understanding some of the nuances, we did a set of interviews with 405 teens ages 15 to 17. We're in a piloting phase right now with some curriculum and some after-school activities that we are testing, and we're also doing some continued assessment. So we're at the front end of, I hope, a long run of research on this concept, because I think it's an important one.
Great.
One of the things that we discovered when we looked at all the responses we got back from teenagers was that they generally named 3 types of sparks, or we were able to categorize their sparks into 3 types. April mentioned this earlier in an earlier slide, but often they would name something that they were good at. They knew it was a talent or a skill that they had. Sometimes they would name it as something that they cared deeply about. So they had a passion for the environment or serving their community or feeding the homeless or whatever it might be. And then slightly less frequently, but still often enough that it became a category of its own, they named a quality about themselves that they knew was really special, such as caring for others or being a friend. And they might have expressed it this way. I really care about my friends. What I find is that every time they really need somebody to listen to, they come to me. They tell me that I'm a really good listener, that I am good at helping them think through their problems. So they know that it's not just generically caring about others, but that some qualities that they have that put that slightly above what other people can do.
I'm a little stuck here. It's just going to move forward here. Sorry.
Fine. I'll talk a little bit.
Just, yeah, you can talk about the results while I try to get this slide to move forward.
About the research and some of the results that we got back from that research. Because I think it's interesting to note that we found that when young people knew what their spark was and had several adults who supported that spark, they were able to say they were more likely to have a sense of purpose. They were more likely to be socially competent and physically healthy, which is important. They were more likely to say they volunteered to help others, and that was important to us because several researchers had suggested that we would be taking young people down a path that would be pretty narcissistic and self-centered, and we didn't believe that. We really were hoping that the results would show us that young people who could identify their own spark would be more generous with others, and that was what turned out to be the case. And finally, but certainly not least in importance, they mentioned having higher grades in school and better attendance when we looked at those young people with both a spark and a spark champion compared to young people who couldn't name a spark or didn't have adults in their lives who supported them. On the flip side, young people who knew their spark and had several adults who supported it were less likely to tell us that they were experiencing depression or that they were engaging in acts of violence towards others. 2 things that we want young people to be able to avoid if we can help them do that. There were a number of sparks that were cited most often, and these were the 10 categories that came up most often. You saw them scattered on a screen earlier. I will tell you that athletics and creative arts in the various studies we've done seem to be the 2 that come out on top. In one study it was creative arts, in another it was athletics. But those far and away were the ones most often mentioned, and I think it's worth noting that since so many school districts have had to make cuts in some of those areas for budget reasons. So we need to be mindful of that as we think about where young people can have an opportunity to experience and develop those sparks.
All right, I'm going to launch a poll here to see before we move forward in the slides. And the poll asks, what percentage of teenagers say that they have a spark or have sparks? All right, votes are rolling in here. What percentage of teenagers say that they have a spark? About 8 more seconds to cast your vote. Okay, uh-oh, we have a tie. All right, let me share this with you. All right, so 40% say 80% of young people do have a spark, or teenagers have a spark. 40% say 69%, and then a scattering of you think maybe this smaller amount. I'm going to hide the poll results and just move forward to the next slide then. All right. So Nancy, if you want to, you can share more of this then too.
Who were in the tied votes. 69% of young people who we surveyed were able to say that they had a spark. 31% said that they didn't have a spark. I think had we continued those conversations, or had they had people who would continue those conversations with them, like a good mentor, eventually some of those 31% would be able to find a spark and have it begin emerging. But what this tells us is that young people need the support of adults in order to be able to claim that spark that is within them and be able to start developing it in whatever way makes sense for them.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, going back to that, first poll then too, that so many adults are really looking for this then too, kind of how do we find that spark or reconnect with our spark? So again, with thinking about mentors and mentees as something they can pursue together, it's exciting. So
there is a challenge for caring adults. 100% of teenagers, as with you in the earlier poll, understand what the idea of a spark is and are interested in finding out what theirs is if they don't already know it. The percentage who can clearly name their spark drops, and the percentage of young people who can both name their spark and say that they have some spark champions in their lives drops again to about 37%. So that's really a challenge for us to be able to step into young people's lives and help them find that. I think the critical role of mentors is that all young people should have an adult who sees their spark, affirms that spark, and helps them explore their spark, because it's, for most young people, not enough to simply know what it is. It helps to have somebody else who can have those conversations, ask them good questions, and lead them into a deeper exploration of it. And for way too many kids, they have adults in their life who are more likely to be telling them that their spark is not practical, they're not good enough at it, or a host of other messages that sometimes dampen their enthusiasm way too early. And my hunch is that for some of you who weren't sure what your spark was, if you think back, there may have been somebody who gave you a message that, oh, that thing you seem to really like as a young person isn't really practical to spend a lot of time on, and so it gets tucked away, although it can flare back up even as an adult.
So with this partnership, what we have worked on, part of what we want to do is get the Sparks materials to mentors. Some of those materials have been adapted. If you're thinking of ongoing training for mentors, or training at the beginning of that relationship to provide information on how mentors can see their mentees spark, affirm it, help them explore it. But another piece that we did, at the Mentoring Partnership, we do a training called Maximize Your Impact. It's our mentor training for new or returning mentors, and we have these key concepts that go with it, but thinking about that mentors can maximize their impact by building these longer, stronger relationships. And so there are pieces along with that, but the three main concepts are really about focusing on what is strong, not what is wrong, which ties in nicely with the assets as well. Paying attention to what mentees would like for themselves, this whole being youth-centered, so strength-based, youth-centered, and about teaching and modeling skills to help young people carry their baggage better, which is really about that mentors can't carry, and thinking about sort of emotional baggage or any of those problems, that mentors can't carry it for young people, but they can teach and model skills to help them carry it better. And so what we've done through this pilot process then too is done a few workshops about sort of molding the two concepts together. So how do we maximize our impact with sparks? And what's been great is to think about, and it was sort of, this was the idea, and to see it in action, it really does work to think about sparks as another tool that can help you focus on what's strong and not what's wrong. It can help you be youth-centered. It can help you, and go hand in hand. And not only do sparks help you focus on these three concepts, but these three concepts can help you as you focus on sparks. And so really molding that it can be a standalone training for mentors, or it can be incorporated into maybe pre-match mentor training or something like that. So that's what we've been working on and delivering that, and it's been really well received. But I have a couple of examples to share with you then to sort of show how those things work, or some ways that sparks we can see them in action and see how using that concept it can be a really helpful tool and resource for mentors. So these are examples that have come directly from the live training, so I know they're relevant, and we were able to get lots of conversation. So hopefully you'll be ready to raise your hands and share some ideas, or share some, type in some questions and comments as well. So here's our first one about sparks in action. So thinking about if your mentee's goal is to become a famous singer, but she can't carry a tune at all. So if we think about that's the issue, but a mentor has been trained to, they're trying to build a longer, stronger relationship by focusing on being strength-based, youth-centered, knowing that they're teaching and modeling skills, but that they're also, if we can go back further, seeing, affirming, and helping explore that young person's spark. Any comments or questions about how could a mentor respond to this scenario, knowing those things or having those tools at their disposal? Give people a chance to type or raise their hands. Okay. Nancy, if you want to share something, you certainly can while we're waiting for people.
All right. This is something that we've found when we've been working with teachers and other folks that are working with young people. They will often say, the young person I'm working with has named a spark, but I don't think they're very good at it yet, or they don't seem to have the skill for it. And I'm always eager to tell them it's not so much about whether they have the skill, but whether the passion is there. I have one son who is an artist who pretty much drew like every other 10-year-old when he was a 10-year-old, and you never would have spotted him as a budding artist. But what I could spot was the persistence. He drew on everything. His ceiling, his jeans, every paper he ever turned in. And the persistence eventually paid off, and the skill developed over time. But it would have been easy to say, well, honey, let's pick something you're really good at, like baseball, and could have pushed him in a whole different direction.
Yeah, and it might be that you could have a mentee who is a great singer, but that's still not their spark, or not what they want to pursue. Sometimes, one of the things that has become clear in looking at the sparks is that a skill is not automatically a spark, and really vice versa. And oftentimes we're thinking, oh, well, you're good at that, maybe you should think about that as a career. And mentors will, think about being strength-based, and the important part about being strength-based and youth-centered is to think, okay, so I found this thing that this young person is good at, but is this what they want to pursue? Is this what this young person, is this their goal, to turn this into, a career or a job? Some of the other responses that we heard for this one were, thinking about, well, what do I say? This mentor was saying that her mentee, who was 15, would sing for her and then say, was that good? What did you think? And so she was kind of stuck on what does she say at that point, or how does she do that? And really the sparks concept was helping her out by giving her some of these responses. I don't know, Nancy, if you want to share any more about that from your observations.
Watching for signs of what the sparks are. Sometimes just naming the thing that you see a young person enjoying is enough of a prompt to get the conversation going. And sometimes they'll say, yes, I really do enjoy that. Sometimes they'll say, no, I don't really like that. What I really like is. So Part of it is asking the questions, and part of it is listening for the answers. If you have someone who is reluctant to talk about their sparks, either they're not feeling completely secure in the relationship yet, or they're not really sure about sharing something that feels pretty personal to them, sharing our own sparks with them, when I was your age, I was passionate about, is sometimes a way of rebalancing that conversation so that they feel there's a space where they can talk with you because you're being open with them. And then finally, asking open-ended questions and listening. What do you think your spark is? I think for a number of young people who told us they didn't know what their spark was, had we had a couple more conversations with them, it would have begun to emerge as they had a chance to wrap their thoughts and some language around it and test out a few ideas.
Well, yeah, and in this example, thinking about this girl who wants to be a famous singer, but in her mentor's opinion can't carry a tune, this response to, oh, so did that sound good? You can comment on, you really seem to enjoy this, or this makes you really happy when you're doing it, to turn the conversation to what is it about it that you love. Maybe it isn't the actual singing that's the spark, it's more the performance, or there could be other things there. Another part that came up, a lot of people started to suggest, well, maybe she needs voice lessons, or she could join a choir, or kind of even thinking of the video games, kind of the systems where you can sing into the system and then it will give you feedback, kind of thinking that it was important for her to get this feedback that, that she needs work or she needed to improve the voice. But one of the tips for Sparks champions too is that for each spark, young people can have multiple champions, and that sometimes it might be just your job to cheer, to show up and cheer them on, and you don't have to play both roles of being that teacher and coach, where you can just cheer them on and be happy that they found something that makes them happy too, and to turn the conversation into something about what do you want to do with this. An example I've been using then too is about my own daughter had an interest in music and had this kind of like toy electric guitar thing, and we got really excited about her interest in the guitar. And so this is for her 5th birthday, I got her this little kid acoustic guitar thing, but then had so many rules about how to use it. I mean, we wanted to have lessons and all these things, but we also gave all these rules about, like, don't touch it, or, basically, like, to be so careful with it that it was almost like we were putting out that spark. Sometimes adults can jump in too much and take control of it and try to push it in a direction that it doesn't necessarily need to go. And just to be, that's where, tying together this mentor training and the sparks concept, to think about, all right, so if I'm going to encourage the spark and do it in a strength-based, you-centered way, how do I do that? So
I think young people are often used to adults having all the answers and telling them things all the time, so Sparks is one of those great areas where you can ask open-ended questions and you can listen intently, and you don't have to have all the answers. You can just keep that conversation going. Some of the ways a Spark champion can support a young person are just to affirm it, so that a young person knows they were really heard when they say, I love playing baseball, or I love collecting agates, or whatever it might be. Encouraging its expression, that's another place where I think adults can step in, and mentors have a great opportunity to do that. Sometimes if your spark is close to theirs, you can be modeling the spark. They're interested in something in particular that you're also interested in, and you can demonstrate how you've found ways to explore that spark in your own life. Finding opportunities to express it. We've created a number of checklists that mentors can use to go down and say, have we ever tried walking out in a park together? Have we ever tried playing board games? Have we ever tried knitting or crochet, or taking apart an iron to see what's inside it? There are so many different ways to explore possible sparks, and mentors can provide some of those opportunities, particularly with younger children. Sometimes it's a matter of running interference. I'd really like to do this, but I don't know how, I don't have the right equipment, I don't know where to sign up for something, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be buying equipment, but you might make sure that someone at their school knows so that they can help them figure out how to do that. Sometimes it's teaching, sometimes it's mentoring, because some of the Sparks require some learning to go along with them to get really good at them. And then finally, showing up. If they're having a recital, if they're playing a baseball game, if they're in some kind of performance or play, young people love it when we can show up in their lives, because that really tells them that we care about what they're interested in.
All right, we have another example here of Sparks in action. So, you know, oftentimes we hear from mentors who are having a hard time. Maybe, you know, one of the questions that came up was, how are we supposed to talk about this if your mentee doesn't want to talk to you at all? You know, and how do we talk about whether they know what their spark is or anything like that? You know, in this case, you know, we don't seem to have anything to talk about. You know, and mentors will often mention to coordinators, well, you know, my mentee isn't telling me anything that he wants to do with me when we are together. What Sparks provides then is that way to, without even having that conversation, you know, if you can't get them to say, you know, this is my spark, you can explore those things together. And some of the resources give lists of, you know, ideas of activities that that people could, mentors and mentees could pursue together and explore together to help you both maybe identify a new spark, reconnect with a spark, or like I've said, you might go try something new and realize that it is absolutely not a spark for either one of you, or something that you're not exactly excited about.
On the ignitesparks.org website, we do have a list of the sparks that young people named, and it's 207 sparks long. So even if you wanted to take that and use it as a checklist with young people, you could probably find something on there that they thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. And here's the website, but there's, you know, you can find all of this research. There are free downloads and things about conversation starters, discussion guides, ideas for sparks. Yeah, and then the full list of sparks here. So each one of these 32 categories, you can find different things, but things that you might be able to try if they haven't done that before. It's one of the really cool things about mentoring is that it'll, you know, sometimes just that's the reason mentors sign up, or part of the reason that they volunteer is that they're interested in doing some different things that they might not do on their own, or reconnecting to things that they loved to do when they were younger and would like to do again with a young person in tow. But lots of great resources here too. They've also put together some of these questions. So starting off with, you know, what is your spark? And to have that conversation and be able to talk about that in ways where you're exploring those things. And you know, for, as we saw, you know, 30% of young people might not know what that is. Or they might know what it is for a couple things, but you could certainly add to that list and find some more things that help them get excited about getting out of bed in the morning, some other things to be passionate about. You know, so then to be able to continue, so you know that's your spark, so, you know, when and where do you do it? You know, who knows about it? Who's helping you? What are some of those obstacles? And to ask, how can I help? And finally, how can you use that spark to make our world better? But, you know, not to assume that they need help, but to ask, again, thinking about being youth-centered and strength-based, about how can I help? Is there anything I can do to support that spark? And maybe it's just that you asked about it and you found out what it was, and then you show up and cheer. There's probably lots of different levels of different ways to be that spark champion. We mentioned some of these tips for spark champions, but one of which is that they can certainly change over time, something that they're excited about. sometimes I think this is hard for adults when you get really excited about that young person's spark and you want to provide all of these opportunities and resources for them to pursue their spark, and then all of a sudden they're not into it anymore. And so recognizing that that can change over time, which we probably know as adults. If you were thinking, if 80% of us knew what our spark was, you know, to stop and think, is this the same thing that I was passionate about when I was younger, when I was a teenager, or was there something else that really gave me energy and was lighting me up from the inside? We mentioned this multiple champions, you know, to be thinking about and helping mentors think about in this particular instance is that, do I need to teach? Do I need to set limits? Do I need to be giving that kind of coaching advice, or can I just be the cheerleader and just support that spark? Nancy, I don't know if you want to share more about the expecting ups and downs in the conversations. Maybe you have some more examples of that.
Well, I think if we reflect on our own lives as adults and the conversations we have, sometimes we're really excited to share about ourselves and something that we're really excited about, but we have a lot of things on our mind, and young people do too. So they might have a spark around rock collecting, but what they really need to talk about is the fact that they had an argument with their best friend in school, and so sparks drifts into the background for a while, which is fine. Also, sometimes people, young people will be at a transitioning point where they are giving up one spark and trying to find another, and sometimes that's painful to realize that they don't like something as well as they thought they did once they really tried it, or they're trying to figure out how to explore the next thing. So sometimes they'll be bursting with questions and comments, and other times they'll want to go in a different direction. So it shouldn't be a chore that every time we have to do a certain amount of time on our sparks.
Yeah. And we've mentioned that, you know, a skill, something you're really good at, isn't automatically the thing that you are passionate about or excited about. And that the spark may not be our work. It doesn't have to be what we're pursuing in our job. I think as adults we probably know that, or a lot of adults know, that you're lucky if you can have your job be something that is also your spark. But there's a lot of adults out there who really seek out those sparks to help balance that, for that work-life balance. And to be able to talk about that and share that with mentees is exciting. You can probably get a sense from a webinar and to hear some of this, but to be in a live training session and to be with mentors and hear how excited and how inspired they are to leave a mentor training thinking about, how can I help my young person find this spark? You know, how can I be strength-based, look for these positive things about this young person, and really be listening to them to see what is it that they want from me and how can I help them get there, and understanding that there are limits to that and boundaries too about, I can teach and model skills to help them carry some of the problems they have better, but I can't carry it for them. And then to add this great, fun concept of sparks and thinking about, this gives me ideas of things to do that we can explore together. It helps me think about how I can watch for these sparks and help them find them as well and affirm that. I've had coordinators say that mentors just, they've never seen mentors so excited to go out and do that work, that sometimes the training they've done in the past may have been a little more focused on, these are some of the problems you might encounter, and, but this gave a really positive twist and a really just accessible, some great tools, and help them feel really ready to tackle anything that came their way. So thinking about how, you can contact us and how you can use this to really motivate and help mentors build those longer, stronger relationships is really exciting. I'm going to pop up some of the resources just so you know that when you click on the link to the presentation slides, that there would be some of these resources available that you can link directly to. But you could also, if you have questions that you've been saving here, questions or comments that you want to type in, or if you want to raise your hand and ask any questions of me or of Nancy, we can do that now. And while they're doing that, Nancy, these are from your slide. I'm familiar with most of them.
But I can run down the list of them and just point out some of the things that you would find. One of the first things we did with our research was write a book. Actually, Peter Benson, our president, wrote the book, Sparks, How Parents Can Ignite the Hidden Strengths of Teenagers, but it's really applicable for, I think, any caring adult who is interested in working with young people. It's got a couple of quizzes, some for the adult, some for the young person, lots of lists, lots of websites and other activities that people can use, so it's a great resource. As I mentioned, we do have a website that we've created for this work, www.ignitesparks.org. And April went through some of the portions of that website. There is a 5-minute video of teens talking about their sparks on that website, and I think you'd really enjoy listening to a conversation about sparks from the teens' point of view. And they're quite emphatic that having adults who support that are really important to them. You're just seeing the top of the head of the video there on your screen. So that's something that also has a discussion guide there if you happened to be working with a group of young people. But it's a great video. It's only 5 minutes long, and it's some young people who have been interviewing each other and talking in a group about their sparks, as well as connecting with their group leader about their sparks. So they're quite articulate, and you can see the passion in everything that they say. We've also partnered with the Best Buy Children's Foundation, so that next website that's listed on the list of resources, at15.com, is actually sponsored by Best Buy. And there are a number of youth-oriented resources there, as well as some lovely short 30-second video clips from a variety of people talking about their own passions. There's also a our Sparks Finder quiz that's available on that, and that's really geared for young people. So if they would like a spot where they can do more exploring, that's a good source. We've listed our own website, and we've also listed a website called parentfurther.com, which is a list of resources for parents, although I think it could be, again, useful for any adult who is working. That's the at15 website there, and there are all kinds of things that you can find there. It's a very engaging site for young people to do some exploring. And we've actually done that 2010 Teen Voice Report is one of our research pieces off on the right-hand side there. And that's a lengthy report that gives more research about how young people express their spark, how they find opportunities to have a voice and express themselves through voice, and whether they are finding the relationships and opportunities they need to really grow into healthy adulthood. So if you are hankering for more of the research, that would be one place you could look. I've listed our own website, and finally the Parent Further website, which has resources for parents, but also for other caring adults working with young people. And again, all of them strength-based and lots of ideas for activities and things you can do with young people.
Okay, and this will also is also on the presentation to check out some resources from the Mentoring Partnership, and at the bottom there is that slideshare.net link to get to the slides. You'll also get that in a follow-up email. Our next Quality in Action webinar is kicking off 2011. On January 5th, we'll be focused on National Mentoring Month and some mentor recruitment tips and resources. Lining up panelists, one of which is Amber Troop from Mentor Michigan, and Amber will share the Mentor Michigan created a Men in Mentoring toolkit. So we'll share some of that and some of the results and impact that that has had, and we have some other panelists in the works, just not confirmed and ready to announce just yet, but we'll be getting that in your e-newsletters. But let's see, do we have any?
Yeah, I have a question here from Linda, and she was asking if there's any specific tools for mentors and mentees to use together during their match time with Sparks.
There are some, and I we've used them in some of our trainings, and I will talk to April about having those posted where you can get at them on probably the Mentoring Partnership website.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Can hold on for, we have a few more minutes, but if you have any burning questions, throw them in now, or maybe we will give permission for people to leave the webinar, and if you have, we'll just kind of stay on if you want to ask a question or type one in. Otherwise, in a couple minutes, I'll just end the webinar for everyone. But thank you so much for coming. I hope to hear from lots of you about how you can incorporate Sparks into your mentor training, and we will be getting those tools up online, and we will share those with you via email. Let you know when that link is there. Thank you so much. And thank you, Nancy, so much for being a panelist today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and I really hope you enjoy working with, thinking about your own Sparks as well as how you can work with Sparks with mentees.
Great. Thank you.